All right, let's get right into it. Imagine an agency that's supposed to be a country's ultimate guardian against corruption. I mean, the top dog, the one watching everyone else. But what if that watchdog is the very thing you should be afraid of? And that quote right there, that's the shocking paradox at the absolute center of this whole story. The very group that's meant to police corruption is now facing accusations of being corrupt itself. It's a huge deal. So, on one hand, you've got the MACC's official mission, its whole reason for being, to be the check on power, to keep everyone honest. But on the other hand, you have these really explosive allegations that it's being used as a weapon, a tool for intimidation, and even for hostile corporate takeovers. So the big question is, how could that even happen? To really get a handle on this, you first have to understand the incredible amount of power that the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, or the MACC for short, actually has. Look, this isn't your average government agency. They can arrest people without the police, they can freeze your personal bank accounts, your company's accounts, basically your entire financial life, in an instant. It reports directly to the Prime Minister, and its headquarters is this massive, intimidating building right in the heart of the government's power center. People who've been targeted say it creates this climate of immense fear. They can show up at your door and just turn your life into a living hell. So this is where a really shadowy network of businessmen comes into the picture. They've been nicknamed the corporate mafia, and they're accused of figuring out how to turn all that power the MACC has into a tool for their own personal profit. And what's wild is just how systematic this alleged scheme is. It's like a four-step playbook they can run over and over. First, you target a successful company. Then, boom, the MACC launches a surprise investigation into the founder. Step 3, you bring the founder in, you detain them, you harass them. And finally, the fourth step, the pressure. They're basically told, hey, all this trouble can just go away. All you have to do is sell us your company for cheap. And this quote, this really shows you the human cost of it all. This comes from an entrepreneur who says they went through this exact playbook. They describe being completely cornered, exhausted, and just feeling pressured into giving up their life's work after these grueling interrogations. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but couldn't this just be a few bad apples, some rogue officers? Well, the investigation found evidence that suggests the connections might actually go all the way to the very top of the organization. So let's break down the key players here. You've got Azam Baki, who's the chief commissioner of the MAC, the top boss. Then there's a businessman named Andy Lim, who's described as a close friend of the chief. You also have another businessman, Victor Chin, who's been called the directing mind of this whole network. And a lot of these operations were apparently handled by one specific unit inside the MAC, known as Section D. Now here's what's so critical. This isn't just a rumor from the outside. There was an internal MACC intelligence memo written by officers inside the agency that straight up documented this close friendship. It said it was well known. So you have a direct written link from inside the MACC itself, connecting the head of the agency to a central figure in this alleged corporate network. And right as all these allegations about the corporate takeovers were swirling, a whole other controversy exploded. And this one was about Azam Baki's own personal finances. You see, in Malaysia, there are really strict legal limits on how many shares public officials can own. It's to prevent conflicts of interest. So when it came out that the MACC chief himself owned a massive stock portfolio way over the legal limit, well, it caused a public uproar. People were protesting in the streets, demanding that he be held accountable. And the plot just keeps getting thicker. It wasn't only that internal memo. Publicly available records, stuff anyone can look up, showed that both men, the MACC chief and his close friend, were investing in the same companies at around the same time. The connection just kept getting stronger. So, with all of this going on, all these allegations, the really big question is, why is Azam Baki still the chief of the MACC? And to answer that, you have to look at the wild world of Malaysian politics. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's a total whirlwind. In 2018, Prime Minister Najib gets thrown out over the giant 1MDB scandal. A reformer is put in charge of the MACC for a bit, but she resigns. Then Azam Baki, an agency insider, gets the job. But here's the real twist. A new Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, comes to power on a huge anti-corruption platform, and then he renews the contract of the very MAC chief who's tangled up in all this controversy. So why does that matter? Well, the theory from analysts and critics is that the MACC, with all of its incredible power, is just too useful as a political weapon to give up. It lets whoever is in government put pressure on their opponents. And sure enough, we have seen high-profile investigations launched against some of the prime minister's biggest political rivals. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It gets right to the heart of the problem. You've got this public promise to fight corruption, but it seems to clash with the private political reality of wanting to hold on to power and the tools that help you do that. So at the end of the day, you're left with a situation where the one institution that was designed to build trust and fight corruption has, for many people, become a source of deep suspicion and, frankly, fear. And that leaves us with this really fundamental, unsettling question. It's a question that gets to the very heart of how government is supposed to work, not just in Malaysia, but everywhere. If the anti-corruption agency itself might be corrupt, then who is watching the watchdog?